He said beautiful to the alien waitress. Now her family thinks he proposed. The night sky over the trade hub was alive with strange colors. Purple streaks of light shimmered through the clouds, and neon signs buzzed above the streets where humans and aliens crossed paths in restless currents. Jack moved slowly through the noise, his boots heavy with the dust of 100 worlds. He had been traveling for weeks, and the hunger in his stomach was louder than the hum of starships overhead. The smell of roasted spices drifted from a corner diner, warm and inviting. Its glowing sign flickered with alien symbols that Jack could not read. But the chatter inside told him one thing. It was open. He pushed the door and stepped into a wave of voices, clinking cups and sizzling pans. The diner was crowded with beings of every shape. Some had horns, some had feathers, and a few wore shimmering robes that pulsed with light. Jack found an empty seat near the counter and let out a breath. His muscles ached, his eyes were heavy, but for the first time that day he felt like he could rest. Then he saw her. The waitress moved between tables with a tray balanced in her hands. She had pale lavender skin that seemed to glow under the diner lights, and her long hair shimmered like silver threads. Her ears tapered into elegant points, and her eyes, bright emerald green, carried a softness that stilled the noise around her. She noticed Jack, gave him a polite smile, and walked over. "First time here?" she asked in a gentle voice, her accent lilting in a way that made the words feel like music. Jack rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, just passing through. Smells good, though." She set a small menu in front of him, her fingers brushing the counter lightly. Jack glanced at her again. Maybe it was the exhaustion talking. Maybe it was the way she seemed to shine in this sea of strangers. But the words slipped out before he could stop them. "You are beautiful." Her tray nearly tipped. A soft color flushed across her cheeks, a shade deeper than her lavender skin. She stared at him, lips parting as if he had said something forbidden, something heavy with meaning. Jack blinked, confused by her reaction. "I mean, sorry, just you are." He gave a tired smile, thinking it was a simple compliment, nothing more. But Lyra, as he would later learn her name, stood frozen for a heartbeat too long. Her emerald eyes softened, then lowered shyly, and she whispered, "Thank you." She hurried away, and Jack sighed, turning back to the menu. He had no idea that with one word, he had just changed his life forever. The morning came too soon. Jack woke to a pounding sound that rattled the thin walls of the inn. At first, he thought it was just the usual noise of ships docking outside. But then he realized it was closer. Someone was at his door. "Human, wake up!" a deep voice thundered. Jack groaned, dragging himself up from the stiff mattress. His head ached from too little sleep, and his stomach reminded him he had barely eaten the night before. He stumbled toward the door, rubbing his eyes, and pulled it open, for figures stood outside. The first was a tall, broad man with skin the same lavender shade as the waitress. His arms were crossed, his jaw sharp, and his eyes narrowed as if he was already judging Jack. Beside him stood a woman with a bright smile, her silver hair tied back, her hands clasped in delight. And behind them, two younger men. Both looked strong, both looked serious, and both stared at Jack like they were deciding how hard they could punch him before the innkeeper would notice. Jack blinked at them, still half asleep. Can I help you?" The tall man spoke first, his voice firm. "I am Doran, father of Lyra. This is Selma, her mother. And these are my sons, Corinne and Taryn." Jack frowned, trying to connect the names. Then his stomach dropped. "Lyra, the waitress." Selma clapped her hands with joy. "Congratulations, traveler. You have chosen well." Jack stared. "Chosen what?" Doran's chest swelled with pride. "You spoke the vow. You looked upon my daughter and called her beautiful. In our culture, those words are sacred. You have declared your intent to bind yourself to her." Jack's mouth fell open. His voice cracked in disbelief. "Wait, no, I was just being polite." Corinne, the older brother, stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Do you think our sister is a joke?" Taryn, the younger one, clenched his fists. You will not insult her like that, human. Selma waved her hands to calm them. Boys, do not frighten him. This is a happy day. It is natural for him to be nervous. She turned back to Jack with a glowing smile. Do not worry, dear. Every man feels the same on the morning after his proposal. Jack dragged a hand down his face. This is a misunderstanding. I did not propose to anyone. But Doran cut him off with a booming laugh. You cannot take back sacred words, human. You have given your vow before the stars themselves. And now you must prove yourself worthy of my daughter. Jack's stomach twisted. He had walked into a diner for food and walked out with a fiancée. And now, standing in the hallway of this shabby inn, with an alien family staring at him like he was already one of them, he realized one thing. He was in trouble. Jack barely had time to pull on his boots before Doran ordered him out of the inn. The lavender-skinned father walked with the steady march of a soldier, each step echoing authority. Selma flitted around her husband like sunlight, talking endlessly about fabrics, ceremonies, and how handsome Jack would look once he was properly dressed. Corinne and Taryn kept tight to his sides, glaring at him whenever he so much as sighed. I think there has been a mistake, Jack said for what felt like the 100th time. I did not mean a vow. Where I come from, calling someone beautiful is just a compliment. That is all. Selma only laughed, a warm bubbling sound that somehow carried no doubt. Of course you say that now, dear, but in time you will see. The stars guide us to the bonds we are meant to hold. You have spoken the words, and the words have answered. Doran grunted in agreement. A man does not get to run from his vow. He either honors it or dishonors himself. We will see which you are. Jack opened his mouth to protest, but suddenly they turned a corner. The diner stood before them, transformed overnight. Bright ribbons swayed from the windows, and strange glowing flowers had been nailed to the doorframe. Neighbors filled the street, some clapping, some whispering excitedly. Jack felt his throat tighten. Oh no, they told everyone. Lyra was inside, wiping down the counter. She froze the instant she saw Jack, her hands trembling around the cloth. She had dressed differently today. A soft violet scarf framed her silver hair, and her emerald eyes darted toward him, then quickly away. Doran raised his hand, and the crowd went still. This human has spoken the vow to my daughter. By the will of our ancestors, he must be tested. The first challenge came immediately. A steaming bowl was slammed down in front of Jack, so hot that the table hissed beneath it. Inside, a thick stew bubbled, its surface glowing faintly red as if it were alive. The smell was sharp, smoky, and laced with something metallic. Selma beamed. Fireheart stew. A dish to test the courage of men. Jack leaned back. Why do I feel like you are not giving me the children's version? Corinne crossed his arms. Eat. The crowd leaned in. Jack lifted the spoon with shaking hands and scooped a mouthful. The instant it touched his tongue, his world caught fire. His throat seared. His lungs burned. It was like swallowing liquid lightning. He coughed, slammed his fist against his chest, and nearly toppled from the chair. Laughter roared through the diner. Corinne slapped his back hard enough to nearly knock the stew out of his stomach. Not bad, human. Most faint after the first bite. Most, Jack croaked, gasping for breath. Selma dabbed his forehead with a cloth, giggling. Do not worry, dear. You only have to finish half. Jack stared at the bowl, then at the dozens of watching faces, then at Lyra. She was standing behind the counter, her hand over her mouth as if trying not to laugh. When their eyes met, she looked away quickly, but not before he saw it, the tiniest flicker of pride. And so Jack kept going. Every burning bite brought tears to his eyes and pain to his stomach, but he pushed through. When he finally shoved the bowl away, the crowd burst into cheers. Next test, Doran barked. They dragged him outside into the courtyard, where a massive boulder sat like a forgotten monument. It was taller than Jack's chest, wide as a small shuttle, its surface rough with deep grooves. Lift it, Doran commanded. Jack's jaw dropped. Are you serious? That thing weighs a ton. 3 tons, Corinne corrected smugly. Jack glared. That does not make me feel better. Still, he crouched beside the stone and wrapped his arms around it. He pulled with every bit of strength left in his body. His muscles screamed, his back ached, and sweat poured down his face. The stone groaned but barely shifted an inch. Taryn snorted. Weak. Jack was about to collapse when Lyra stepped forward, her voice quiet but firm. Father, that same stone took 3 men last season. It is not a fair test. The crowd murmured in agreement. Doran's frown deepened, but he said nothing. Jack let go and stumbled back, panting. His arms trembled, but when he glanced at Lyra, he caught the faintest hint of a smile. The final test came at the dusty field behind the diner. Corinne and Taryn shoved a leather ball into his arms. Run, Strike, Corinne said. You will play against us. If you can stay on your feet, you pass. Stay on my feet? Jack muttered. That is the whole rule? But before he could ask further, the brothers charged. They slammed into him with the force of speeding trucks, knocking him flat into the dust. The crowd cheered as Jack groaned, coughing dirt from his lungs. He barely scrambled upright before they came at him again. It was chaos. He stumbled, rolled, sprinted when he could, and spent more time on the ground than off it. Corinne and Taryn were merciless, slamming him into the dirt again and again, but no matter how many times they knocked him down, Jack stood back up. His clothes were torn, his body bruised, but he refused to quit. By the time Doran called the game to an end, Jack could barely breathe. He leaned on the fence for support, his vision swimming. Selma rushed to him with a cup of water. Look at him. He may not be strong, but he has heart. Doran studied Jack in silence, then gave a slow nod. Perhaps there is something in him after all. The crowd cheered again, their doubts shifting to admiration. Jack wanted to collapse, to shout that this was insane, that he never asked for any of this. But then he noticed Lyra at the edge of the crowd. Her emerald eyes lingered on him, glowing softly with something he could not name. Hope. And against his better judgment, Jack stayed quiet. That night, after the trials and the endless noise of the crowd, Jack found himself wandering behind the diner. His body ached in places he did not even know existed, and every step felt like dragging lead across gravel. He leaned against the wall, tilting his head back to watch the strange skies. The stars here looked different. Some burned green, others shone blue, and faint ribbons of color shimmered across the heavens like painted brushstrokes. For the first time since his arrival, Jack felt small, like a stranger adrift in someone else's story. Does it hurt? The soft voice startled him. Lyra was standing nearby, carrying a small lantern that glowed with pale light. She walked closer, her scarf trailing behind her, and for the first time that day, her eyes were not shy or darting away. They lingered on him, full of curiosity. Jack chuckled weakly. Only everywhere. Your brothers hit like starships. Lyra actually laughed. A quiet, melodic sound. She knelt beside him and handed over a small flask. Here, drink this. It will help with the pain. He took it and sniffed. This is not another bowl of fire stew, is it? Her smile grew. No, just a calming tea. I promise. Jack drank cautiously, and warmth spread through him, easing the sharp edges of his aches. He let out a long breath. That is actually nice. Thank you. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The lantern light flickered across her face, softening her features, turning her emerald eyes into pools of glowing green. She looked almost otherworldly, and yet so human at the same time. Jack broke the silence. I still do not understand why your family thinks I proposed. Lyra's cheeks colored faintly. Because you did, at least in our way. The word you spoke, it is not something given lightly here. It means you see a future, promise, a vow. Jack sighed. Back on Earth, it is just a compliment. Something you say when someone catches your eye. I did not mean to make things complicated. Her lips curved into a small, almost sad smile. Complicated, maybe, but not unwelcome. She hesitated, then lowered her gaze. No one has ever called me that before. Jack blinked. You mean, no one has ever called you beautiful? Lyra shook her head. To most, I am only the daughter of Doran and Selma, the one who carries trays, cleans tables, and serves food. My brothers protect me so fiercely that no one dares look twice. Customers see me as part of the diner. Nothing more. Her voice dropped, softer than the night breeze. But you looked at me. Jack's chest tightened. He had not expected that answer. For a moment, he forgot about the aching bruises, the stew, the absurd tests. All he could see was the young woman beside him, carrying dreams she had never spoken aloud. What do you want, Lyra? He asked gently. Her emerald eyes lifted to the sky, reflecting the shimmering ribbons above. To leave, she whispered. To see the stars. To step onto worlds I have only heard of from passing travelers. I love my family, but I do not want to spend my whole life serving stew in the same diner. I want more. Jack felt the words settle in his chest. He knew that longing too well, the ache of wanting to belong somewhere but never quite finding the place. He thought of his endless travels, the lonely inns, the forgotten outposts, the feeling that he was always passing through but never arriving. I get it, he said quietly. I left Earth because I wanted more, too. But the thing no one tells you is, sometimes more feels a lot like less. Empty ships, empty rooms, empty nights. Lyra turned to him, her expression softening. For a heartbeat, they simply looked at each other, two souls caught between longing and belonging. Jack smiled faintly. Maybe I was meant to stop here. Lyra's breath caught, but before she could answer, the diner door creaked open. Selma's cheerful voice rang out, calling her daughter inside. Lyra rose quickly, clutching the lantern to her chest. She paused, though, her eyes lingering on Jack for a long, quiet moment. Then she whispered, "Good night, Jack." And with that, she slipped back inside, leaving Jack alone with the stars, and the sudden, startling thought that maybe he did not want to run anymore. The next evening, the diner was transformed again. Lanterns swayed from the ceiling, glowing with soft blue fire. Long tables were crowded with dishes of every color. Steaming breads that shimmered gold, fruits that bled juice like starlight, and meat sizzling on hot stones. The smell wrapped around Jack until his stomach roared louder than his nerves. But food was not why he was here. Every eye in the diner turned toward him as he entered. Neighbors had gathered. Relatives Jack had never met. Even a few curious travelers who had heard of the human groom. Jack felt their stares pressing in, each one waiting for him to play his part in a story he never meant to write. At the head table, Doran stood tall, his presence commanding silence. Beside him, Selma radiated warmth, her hands clapping together in delight. Corinne and Taryn loomed nearby, arms crossed, daring Jack to falter. And then there was Lyra. She sat quietly, her scarf neatly draped, her emerald eyes fixed on her lap. Jack's heart thumped. Doran raised his voice, deep and steady. The tests have been given. The trials endured. The vow has been spoken. Tonight, we honor the union that will join human and Zarian blood. The crowd erupted in cheers. Cups clashed, plates rattled, voices rose. Jack swallowed hard. His mouth was dry. He leaned toward Selma, whispering desperately, "Wait, do I get a say in this?" Selma only patted his hand. "Of course, dear. You get to say yes." Jack slumped in his chair. Fantastic. Just fantastic. When the noise quieted, Doran lifted his hand again. His stern gaze fell heavy on Jack. "Speak now, traveler. Will you take my daughter as your life bond? Will you honor the vow you gave?" The room froze. All eyes turned to him. Jack felt the weight of 100 expectations crushing his chest. He could tell the truth, say it was all a mistake, that on Earth, beautiful meant nothing more than a kind word. But then his eyes found Lyra. She looked so small at the long table, her hands clasped together tightly. She dared to glance at him, and in her emerald eyes he saw it again. The dream of the stars, the fear of being trapped, the hope that maybe, just maybe, she was worth being seen. And suddenly Jack knew the truth. He stood, his knees shaking, and the crowd went silent. He looked at Doran, then Selma, then the brothers who were ready to tear him apart if he spoke the wrong word. But finally, his gaze settled on Lyra. "When I called her beautiful," Jack said, his voice unsteady but growing stronger with each word, "I did not understand what that word meant here. I thought it was just a compliment, something small. But now I see it was the truest thing I have ever said." A ripple passed through the room. Selma gasped, hands to her mouth. Corinne's glare faltered. Taryn's arms lowered just slightly. Doran's eyes narrowed, testing him. Jack's voice softened, but carried through the silence. "Because Lyra is beautiful. Not just here, not just tonight. She is beautiful because she dreams. Because she looks at the stars the way I used to when I was young. She is beautiful because she made me feel, for the first time in a long time, like maybe I belong somewhere. Like maybe I belong with her." Lyra's breath caught, her emerald eyes widening with tears. The diner exploded into cheers. Selma wept openly, clapping her hands like a child. Corinne and Taryn groaned but exchanged reluctant smiles. Doran studied Jack for a long, heavy moment, then gave a single approving nod. Jack barely noticed. His eyes never left Lyra's. And when she smiled, shy, trembling, radiant, it was as if the whole universe lit up. The feast carried on deep into the night. Music filled the diner. A lively tune played on instruments Jack had never seen before. Long crystal pipes and drums that thumped like a heartbeat. Neighbors danced between the tables, clapping in rhythm, while plates of glowing food never seemed to empty. Jack sat dazed at the head table, his stomach full, his body still aching from the trials, but his heart lighter than it had been in years. Every time he looked across at Lyra, he found her already looking at him. And every time, she quickly turned away with a smile she could not hide. At one point, Selma leaned close, her eyes bright with mischief. "Do you see, dear? The stars never make mistakes." Jack chuckled softly. "I am starting to believe you." Later, when the lanterns dimmed and the crowd thinned, Jack slipped out into the cool night air. The street was quieter now, ribbons swaying gently from the diner windows, glowing flowers still shining at the door. He leaned against the railing, staring at the strange sky, breathing in the crisp air. "Jack!" He turned. Lyra stood there, her scarf loosened, her silver hair catching the lantern light. She looked nervous, her hands folded in front of her, but her emerald eyes held a new strength. He smiled softly. "I am guessing I will not be able to explain myself out of this now." Lyra laughed quietly, shaking her head. "No, not after a speech like that." They stood in silence for a moment, the night settling around them. Then Lyra stepped closer, her voice softer. "Did you mean it? What you said?" Jack's throat tightened. He could have lied, could have smoothed things over, could have tried to keep it simple. But for once in his wandering life, he did not want simple. "Yes," he said firmly. "Every word." Lyra's breath hitched. Her smile trembled as tears filled her eyes. But they were not sad tears. They sparkled in the lantern glow, full of relief, of joy, of something deeper. "I have always dreamed of leaving this place," she whispered, "of stepping into the stars. But tonight, for the first time, I do not feel trapped. I feel chosen." Jack reached out, taking her hand carefully, as though it were something fragile and priceless. "Then maybe we can choose the stars together." Her fingers tightened around his, warm and steady. Behind them, the diner was still alive with laughter and music. Doran stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching in silence. Selma peeked from behind him, grinning like the stars themselves. Even Corinne and Taryn leaned on the rail, exchanging smirks that, for once, held no malice. Jack glanced at them all, then back at Lyra. For the first time in a long, long while, he did not feel like a man passing through. He felt like a man arriving home. He smiled at her, the words slipping from his heart without hesitation this time. "Beautiful." And Lyra smiled back, tears shining in her emerald eyes, knowing that this time, the vow was real.